Thank you, Jim. Any questions?
Tom Wright, back in here again. You've got two analogies I fully intend to steal. One is that stimulus is the methadone of the economy. That is so great. And I will use roadkill with a pulse as well.
I should have trademarked that one, but I've never gotten around to it.
Too late. I've already got it. I agree with you that this recession has no analog to earlier recessions, but when I note that the three biggest errors made during the Depression was allowing the banks to close, and okay, we haven't allowed the banks to close, but the banks are facades, they're not loaning money, so essentially the banks are closed at this point, one. Two, taxes went up, or we raised taxes during the first Depression, and as you said, it's looking like taxes are going up. Three, we got protectionist, and gee, we put tariffs on Chinese tires just last week. It seems like I see more and more analogs to the Depression, and I'm only thinking in terms of how long this recovery might be. Do you see those same analogs?
Yeah, and I would go a little further and make one other observation. I agree with all of those completely, and I think the analogy ultimately carries that this is going to be a very long, slow recovery. I think one has to build some of their investing assumptions around the idea that this is a 10-year problem, and that there really isn't a simple way out of it. The dilemma that is presented for the government at this point is, I think, stepping up in everything they did, not really knowing how to do it. I don't think they did a half-bad job, if I can use that phrase, in terms of trying to arrest the problems when we really went into the meltdown stage. I don't think anybody knew how to do it. I'm not one of those that's going to sit and complain about what they did when they really didn't know what tool set they needed, and in a lot of cases didn't officially have the tool set. So I think they did okay trying to arrest the meltdown. But the other part of the problem that we're facing is that 17% underemployment rate and continuing job losses is creating a large number of people who are otherwise employable, that the longer they go structurally unemployed, the more problematic it gets for the economy, because they will become permanently unemployed. Their skill sets get stale, or their conviction starts to wane about their capability to contribute to what they're doing, and they settle for less and less. And what we don't want as an economy is this growing number of structurally unemployed that we can't get back in the workforce. And to your point, the government is caught in the horns of a dilemma here, because if we don't get those people back to work, they will become gradually structurally unemployed. If the consumer isn't going to spend to buy all that stuff that they're going to deliver, then the government is obliged to try to get them employed, and the problem is the government has nothing left in its checkbook. So I think the ultimate issue, it's a very protracted, very problematic recovery in the U.S., and that's why we really use the word global, global, global all the time now. There are lots of small companies as well as big companies that sell more than half of their product to the rest of the world. If we don't have a company in the portfolio that's 40 or 50% or more selling to elsewhere than the United States, we're probably not in it. And we own virtually no consumer stocks because of the reasons we talked about.
One thing I might add there that at least has come across my screen is I think somewhere around 1,400,000 unemployed are scheduled to run out of unemployment benefits between now and the end of the year. And the options are either Congress is going to have to allot more money to it, or you have a segment of the population out there that has no benefits. Neither one of them is a particularly attractive alternative, I don't think.
Yeah, Tom.
If I may, Rich. Either of you, either Boyd or Jim, do you see any taste to re-implement the Gold Confiscation Act of 1933?
I'll defer to Jim on that.
I was going to defer to Boyd. Gold is an interesting thing. As a value investor, I tend to run away from anything that draws fanatical commitment. And gold is one of those things where people have very fanatical opinions one way or the other. It seems like it's only 2% of the world reserves. It could be bigger. I could see how gold could go up, but it's not a solution for the Chinese or anybody else. The Chinese $2 trillion in reserves is probably, this is just a seat of the pants guess, but I'm going to guess it's 60% of the world's reserves, maybe more. So if 2% is in gold, they can't get enough of their reserves out to put in gold either. It just doesn't solve their problem. So is gold going to go up a lot? I don't really know. I don't think anybody can go back to the gold standard when they're in as much difficulty as the U.S. is right now. I don't know how you reattach yourself back to that, because the only way to solve in the long run, of course, if you're spending more than you really can afford, is to deflate the value of your obligations going forward. So you want the dollar to go down. I think the last thing they want to experience is being accountable to a fixed exchange rate on the dollar. I'm not saying it wouldn't be a good idea, but I think they'd fight it tooth and nail.
Oh, I hear you on not going back to it. I'm just wondering if they're going to take away the gold we've got, which is what they did in 1933. We all had to turn in our gold.
You know, at this point, I don't think it's desperate enough to do that, but your guess is every bit as good as mine on that.
Tom, do you have any comments on that?
Well, I think because people remember the 1933 episode, and when that episode occurred, people were under the impression they were going to get the gold back. This was just an emergency measure. And so, sure, I trust our wise overlords with my gold. I'll hand it to them. But I think now, having been burned by that, I think people are less likely to comply. I think it would be like what would happen if you tried to confiscate people's guns. They'd hand over the one gun that the maintenance of it is just a real pain. It's hard to clean the thing. You hand that one over. There you go, sir. And then you've got your big stash in the back. And I think that's likely to happen with gold if they tried it. Not that I have a big weapons cache in my house.
One thing regarding global trade, I saw a picture yesterday of probably 200 ships and mothballs that are tankers that are docked outside a harbor in, I think it was off in Japan, it might have been China.
Singapore.
Singapore,
Yeah.
And the biggest shipping companies in the world are located in Germany, and they built a lot of super tankers, and a couple of them are very close to bankruptcy because there's just no trade going on. So things have to get a lot better before we recover, for sure.